They have a culture of their own. They've got a society of their own. They've got a government of their own. They've got a planet of their own, maybe even a group of planets. They might have suffered their own wars. All of these things are the things that I'm holding back on because it's just too much information right now, because a lot of people are just stuck on the fact that, oh, are UFOs real? They don't even think about the peoples that are flying these things.
Holy mackerel, that can't be aircraft. There actually is a large unidentified object circling the Earth at incredible speed.
Naturally, we are very curious to know where it is you come from.
So today we have Jay Sands. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I appreciate you being here. So you're retired Master Sergeant with the U.S. Air Force, correct?
Yeah, served 22 years honorably, discharged in 2007. So yeah, retired Master Sergeant.
You know, you were also featured in James Fox film, The Program, which great film, and kind of made the rounds with some of the bigger names in the podcast world with Rogan and Sean Ryan, et cetera. Where were you stationed when you first got wind of the program, or what made you first aware that there was a program?
Well, it was the third duty station at Nellis Air Force Base is when I got introduced to the program. And that's where it all began. I knew that when we were working up on the Nellis test range that everybody would, talk about Dreamland. And it was just the next mountain range over. You could see it from the top of Black Mountain where we were working and training air crews, because that's what we were doing. So, yeah, I knew about it when I got to Nellis. I got curious and eventually got picked up to go actually work there.
When at Nellis and you had heard about the program, did the program have a name to your understanding, or did they just call it the program, or what were they calling it?
I refer to it as a legacy program. There's a specific classified program name for it. But Groom Lake, Dreamland, Toyland, these are all the nicknames that it was used to describe it, so just anything that was kind of like really mysterious and kind of cool. That's what people were calling it. When
were you at Wright-Patterson? What year? From what year to what year were you stationed there?
I wasn't stationed at Wright-Pat. I did a lot of missions there for the program. We were stationed in Nellis Air Force Base. There was me and 3 other analysts that were on the team that were read in. We worked within the program to pretty much kind of do some counter intel or telecommunications assessments to help the program people understand what their security posture was, whether or not they were susceptible. So as part of that job, we would go to Wright-Patterson, which was probably the most frequent place we would go to, and then some of the other locations around the continental U.S. is mainly where we were going. Like Eglin Air Force Base, White Sands, places like that.
I think I heard you talking about your role and you can fine tune this for me, but your role, as an example, would be to transcribe phone calls in order to make sure that these phone calls could have legal implications. So the accuracy of the transcription had to be 100%. And it was at that point that you actually had heard some conversations that were talking about program stuff. And is that accurate?
Yes, it's very accurate. You're right. We're intercepting all the different telecommunications types that we had from the 1990s. At that time, radio, telephones. We were starting to monitor the fax machines and things like this that were coming online. We weren't into cell phones just yet. But yeah, we would go on 2-week missions and monitor all the different communications, telecommunications. And yeah, we listened to literally thousands, tens of thousands of calls, tens of thousands of telecommunications, whatever means we had to get those, as well as working with the OSI team, who was the second half of our team. And we would help them to do things like what we call dumpster diving, where you go into the trash bags that they were throwing away and trying to see if they were throwing away classified information or information that we could piece together what their mission type was. just like the enemy would, like a Russian or a Chinese person would. They do the same thing. So we did all of those things so they would get a full, our clients would get a full picture of what their posture was. So we heard from the scientists, the engineers, the leadership, the worker bees, everybody in great detail after these tens of thousands of different telecommunications types. So we were, sad to say, we pretty much cracked the mission type of every place we went. People are just that way. They tend to be a little bit too talkative sometimes. So they kind of made it easy for us.
You're talking about your mission might have nothing to do with the program, but is the client a government agency, or is it someone within the Air Force that is looking to get certain information?
In my case, working within the Air Force, we had to work with what we called DoD leased and or owned telecommunication types. We were allowed to monitor and or gather intelligence on the communications that were coming from, like, say, Wright-Patterson, if that's where we were working at the time. However, as you know, there's a distant end and there's an originating end on every, telecommunication. So sometimes these people would call different parts of the world, other laboratories, other facilities all over the place. So we were hearing from literally hundreds of other sites out there that are also part of the program. And they were coordinating all sorts of different things.
So what are you at liberty, if you had a couple cool conversations you could share from that time monitoring calls, what are you at liberty to say? I know, you still have to honor some level of secrecy. So give me a couple cool ones that you heard. Okay.
Well, there's one that I don't talk often of, but did occur. That was the Eben call. I remember distinctly getting that one and thinking it was one of the strangest ones we had, where one of the, interviewers or interrogators was discussing things about what he called an Eben. Later, we figured out that this was some sort of a person that was being held captive and being interrogated for information.
And just real quick, let me jump in. An Eben, for those that don't know, go ahead and define that.
It's an extraterrestrial biological being. It's just a short term for that. It's kind of like an acronym. That's what I think it is. Anyway, so the conversation shocked both me and the other three analysts who were there with me, because as soon as I finished gisting the conversation, we didn't transcribe the conversation yet because it takes time. That's usually after the mission's done. But we do take notes with our pencils and pens on pieces of paper that are called gist sheets. So I got done gisting this call and recording it, and I just sat back and I was like, guys, what on earth did I just hear? Because this person said that they had just finished interrogating this Eben, and that the Eben had said that they were going to be coming back 50 to 70 years from either the 1990s or the Holloman Air Force Base, because that was also mentioned during the call meeting that was supposed to take place at Holloman Air Force Base. So 50 to 70 years, it's about 2030s ish is the window of time that they're going to come back and ask for their equipment back, their prisoners to be released, and then I think they called them the emissaries could be exchanged. And I just was shocked. I was like, I can't believe it. I just listened to one of the most interesting things I've ever heard. And all the other analysts gathered around my rack, which is what they call your position. And they all wanted me to play it back for them. So I rewind the tape several times so that they could listen to it. And their eyes were just popping out of their head. The mission supervisor and the senior analyst, which was, a couple of my friends, and just immediately said they were going to go across the street and tell the leadership. Sad part of ending to the story is that after I got to know David Grush and the other guys that are working in the investigating part of this whole thing back in the task force, the UAP task force, they had all the other information about, the kind of the climate, I would have thought that shocking information about, perhaps them coming back for another meeting and exchanging the equipment and the prisoners was going to be a big deal. But from what David said is that no, they probably sat on it, or it was quieted down. The other shocking part of the conversation is really what drove me to, go and become a whistleblower. And that was during the conversation, the distant end person said, well, what if we don't want to give the equipment back? And the interviewer or the interrogator guy said, well, you don't want to do that. And the other guy was like, well, why? Why not? And he said, well, you'll be put to death if you do, if you don't give it back. And that's the part that really concerned me, because that involves both me, my friends, and maybe some of the, definitely some of the other people in the program. And I just wanted to make sure they, at least in the government, were aware of this, because there's nothing like, leadership making decisions for everybody else that literally puts your life at risk and not inform you about it. That's kind of the feeling I got now, is that they sat on this information. And there's people in the program that are just going about their days, don't even realize that this was something that was going on in the 90s, and that these Ebens will be coming back sometime in the 1930s or 40s to come and take the stuff back one way or the other, either given to them by us in good faith or taken by force, I imagine, if that doesn't happen.
Wow, dude. And when you hear it, it's like, I mean, just from what you're saying, if I was sitting there, me and my producer here, Ryan, are sitting there with two other dudes, and that's our job, and we heard this come through, again, you're like, is this for a movie or is this even real? But to rewind it a little bit, so what you heard, basically, for those listening, the Holloman reported event wasn't Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials, and there was some kind of a deal made where we would exchange technologies, even some of their beings for some other considerations on our end. That's just roughly speaking. So this extraterrestrial, this debrief said that the extraterrestrial is asking for, they're going to want the equipment back from that from that meeting in the 1930s with Eisenhower. Was it the 30s, or what was the date on that?
A little bit later. I think it was the
40s.
Yeah, it's probably the 40s. I think 45.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So he's saying they're going to want their equipment back. And the guy, one of the interviewers of the Eben, is saying, yeah, well, what if we don't give it back? And his supervisor is saying, don't do that. It'll basically cost you or whoever doesn't give it back their lives.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. Yeah, I was shocked. Like I said, and the rest of the analysts were just as shocked, because we're pretty nonsensical. We're working in a highly clandestine program. We're handpicked literally to come work there for the types of work that we're expected to do, and we're hard to shake to begin with.
Yeah.
Because we've been out there, worked on missions, and we literally, it rocked our world. We were like having a lot of trouble trying to figure out, what exactly were all the implications to this, because you're talking this person or this Eben that was being interrogated obviously came from a civilization we didn't know about. We couldn't ascertain, and it seemed that the people that were interrogating this being also knew that he was not like us, in other words, not a human. And obviously it represents a civilization that is out there. And that really started to really dawn on all of us as analysts that, we're not alone. And this is seriously, I'm going to have to really think about this, because it really rocked our worlds.
And what year was that?
I believe it was 1991 or 2. 91 or
2-ish. Okay. And then fast forward and you see that ATIP and OSAP, or ATIP, I think, is when Grush was involved, right? Where he's actually working in the program, or not the program, not the legacy program, but ATIP. and this was brought to his attention after the fact?
Yeah, because I don't know about his the task force folks like David Grush's ATIP involvement. I don't know how much he had or whatever. I knew him only when he was part of the UAP task force.
Okay.
And we were analyzing all the imagery, you know, the Mosul orb and all this other good stuff that you've seen in the news, you know. And I was there analyzing that stuff alongside them. And the way this all came out was I had posted some replies to that website that's on the Top Secret Network. And that's what got me an interview with David Grush and the team.
Okay.
The task force.
Okay, so you worked with David per se on some stuff. And what year was that?
That was probably the first time, 2022, I believe.
And that's when it was a task force, right? That's what it was called then, right? The UAP task force?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. And there were only very few people like David that were actually employed as part of they actually sat in an office and could call themselves an office. Most of the people, like the hundreds, if not thousands of analysts that are out there in the DIA, CIA, who are all part of the UAP task force analysis, well, they were kind of doing this as a volunteer between, you know, their different things, their responsibilities of the day. They would go in there, say you're an imagery analyst, and you would look at the videos for the task force, and you would offer your honest opinion, and then the entire community would debate that. So that's who I was.
Okay.
And I was mainly there because I'd worked in, you know, a lot of different black programs, and I did not want them going down rabbit holes of things that I already knew were just in our inventory, and that we should concern ourselves with these other things over here that might be actually something that's unexplainable. So rather than something in our inventory.
Yeah, I understand. So your role as an analyst and other analysts that were in the program, that's what your expertise was. Whatever your skill set was or expertise as an analyst was being leveraged with looking at the UAP potential evidence or communications, whether it's photos, footage. So each individual person had kind of an expertise or skill set that they could help kind of decipher and really cut to the chase, or maybe say what's a waste of time and maybe what's time better spent. That's an analyst role. So that's basically what your role was. That's correct. Yeah, everybody was very respectful. Most of the time, there were a few people that were real oddballs that really, if you didn't agree with them, they'd go off just like like on X Spaces. Yeah. But they were quickly mitigated or sometimes excommunicated out of the community because they were just too much personality. But most of us were very respectful, even if we didn't fully agree with each other, or whatever. So it was a very good community. I really enjoyed those conversations. I remember the pros and the cons of both sides of the issues and the videos we were looking at. And yeah, it was good to see things that you didn't think of on your own coming to light, because some of these other people were very brilliant, scientists, engineers, you name it, they were all there. And here we were all sharing ideas, and it was great. It's a collaborative environment like any other. If it just took the name UAP out of it, but applied it to, it could be a myriad of subjects within the government. There's organizations just like that studying different things. This happened to be the UAP thing. So they're going to get the best and brightest in their disciplines and apply it to the analysis. So I understand that. Well, that's that conversation I could only imagine, and I want to keep moving, but there's so many things I want to touch on. But in the respect of, for respect of you and your time, I found this interesting, that after the program was released in December of 2024, literally 2 months later, they have a congressional hearing. Michael Schnellenberger, author, journalist of note, produces a document to Congress, and the document is from somebody from the program. And I guess I want to ask you this. They put a name on this, and it's called the Immaculate Constellation. And that, what he described, this insider that produced this document describes, is pretty much exactly what you're describing, and what James Fox, I think, is trying to articulate and gets the point across, that there's very likely a program outside of ATIP, OSAP, the a legacy program is exactly what you described. And they gave it a name. Had you ever heard that name before?
Yeah, I had. Matter of fact, I know the individual that brought that to light and gave that Schellenberger. I had met with him about a year prior to that. We actually had some lunch. He was very nervous. It was the first time him, wanting to talk to anybody, but I was very happy that he brought that to my attention. When we talked about it, because he didn't give me the exact name first, but then I knew what he was talking about. I didn't fill him in on everything that program's about, or that part of the program is, because there's many different programs within the program itself, hundreds, if not thousands, of different little caveats that you can, niches of information technology. But about a year later, yeah, he, because I told him, yeah, I'm a whistleblower and all that stuff, and I can help you if you need it. And I was very proud of him that later on he actually did become a whistleblower and provided the information he had and his interpretation thereof of the information. That's about as much as I want to say about that. But yes, I do know the individual personally. He's a great, great man. He really considered everything before he said it. And he's very, I think he's got himself a safety net that now he's become a whistleblower, because there's a lot of good things that happen when you get to legal protections that the whistleblower programs and stuff that bring you. So I'm glad that he did it.
Yeah.
He needed to be.
Yeah. Man, and I guess, a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon since this became in the public eye, really after 2017 with the New York Times article. Now you have everything, people saying, well, yeah, but the lead card in that article, the Tic Tac, is actually Lockheed Martin. But then the other side saying, well, where do you think Lockheed Martin got if it is them, got the technology? It's been a legacy reverse engineering program from captured craft retrievals. So it's creating it's almost like the political landscape in our country. Like now, people are taking sides, but I guess there's always a perception that people that are newer to this that I talk to, I've got friends and stuff. I've been looking into this for 40 years, right? But I've got friends that are just jumping on the bandwagon, and they think like the UAP task force or ATIP or is like 8 dudes in a room. And that's like, it's these 8 guys in a room that are studying UFOs. But you talk to someone like you, and you can kind of paint the picture of just, like I said, imagine anything with the government, that there's a program that we're building out. And I actually, by day, do tech recruiting. So I've done, I place cleared government contractors with their usually former military. They have a skill set, analyst, project manager, software developer, and place them on with a government contractor. It could be like a Lockheed or General Dynamics, or a contractor that's won a bid to provide an upgrade in software technology to Department of Defense, et cetera. And so what I found interesting is what people don't realize, and I try to tell people this, like all the whistleblowers are just trying to get famous. I'm like, let me tell you something, man. The money you can make being a government contractor or being on contract for a project after you get out of the military is very good. It's a lucrative career. It's really what a lot of them are counting on the next 20 years of their life to retire. Coming forward sometimes removes that opportunity for them. And not only that, now the government is not happy with them, and the government contractors don't want to touch them. That's a big deal for people to put themselves in that position, risking really their livelihoods and maybe more. So I don't think people get the gravity of what it means to actually be a whistleblower. It's not something I would think you would do for shits and giggles, for attention,
No, definitely not. It's not been a fun ride for me, nor for any of the other whistleblowers. I can tell you, becoming a whistleblower, I don't know of anybody that I know that truly knows what they saw and what they've heard and what they know, wanting to go public. Really, the driving force for most of the people I know that have been whistleblowers and went public, like myself, is self-protection from the people in the program.
Yep.
It's not because we want to be famous. It's because we've experienced things like our cars and our homes being broken into, tracking devices put on them, some people actually receiving anonymous threats to life and limb, and things like this. And that's the reason most of us came out public. Is just, okay. And that's kind of what I did when I was part of the film and the program as well, is I asked James when we kind of ran into each other by accident through some friends that I told him I wanted a deathbed confession, kind of a video of myself. And he would do it like an interview kind of a session for me. And we did that, and it ended up making it into the movie. Because later on my name got leaked, and it was kind of serendipitous, but I went public even though I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So for me, it was even an accident. So there's all these reasons, but I've never seen anybody come forward and do it just for fame and fortune, because literally everybody I know that is a whistleblower ended up in not making a penny for what they did. Maybe they've written a book and maybe they made some money off of that, but that's about it.
Yeah, no, I understand where you come from. Did you listed a number of pitfalls as a whistleblower? Have you experienced all the ones that you mentioned?
Yeah, I'd say so. I went through the whole wicket. I was one of the first, just so you know the background. The time I came forward, David Grush and I both were talking about, giving our testimony. Now, just so you know, and the rest of the people that are watching your show know, that he was under a different process than I was. He was going through a formal inspector general complaint system. I was not. And you can go to Congress under and be referred to Congress under an inspector general complaint, or you can come forward as just a concerned citizen. And I think there's a third way where, you're subpoenaed. Those are the three ways. I came in as a concerned citizen. So he was tied up at the time, and this was when the first NDAA was coming out. So I ended up actually giving my testimony about a week or so before David did. Then David came in after that, and so we were like the first two through the pipeline after that happened. And that was also when Arrow was first standing up.
Yeah.
We got to talk to Congress about Arrow and what we thought about it and what the charter should be, if there need to be stronger legislation and things like that. It was really a really great time to be able to be there during that groundbreaking year. And you've seen now that we're still, kind of on fire about the whole thing and trying to get things done. So I'm really glad and happy to have been part of that process along with David. And I think a lot of the other folks too that are also big names in the UAP community and in Congress. So very, very good time. So that was how it went. He was, like I said, David was under a different process than me. He was more restricted about what he could talk about. Me, I could come in there and talk at the top secret level in the Congress's SCIF, both the House and Senate side.
Okay.
So that's how it kind of rolled it out. And then later on, I think the following year, the roles were changed because he was exonerated in January the following year of all wrongdoings because they were trying to take his clearance and everything. So they exonerated him, and he finished out all of his other legal wickets, like doing his pre-publication about what he could talk about to the public with. He had that done. The ICIG, the Inspector General for the intelligence community, he had all that stuff done. He was a whistleblower now through Congress. I had not done all that.
Yeah. I
had just been through, I talked to Arrow, I talked to Congress, but I hadn't done the other two. So he was ready to go public before I was. And it was kind of weird that Friday, I remember he and I had a conversation and we were both discussing. I said, dude, I really feel like I need to go public. I'm feeling somebody has to break the ice with the public. And I said, I'm not quite done. And he said, Jay, I've got all my ducks in a row. Let me do it. And so he just said, I said, yeah, you go for it, brother. he did, and I was very proud of him. That ended up being his big testimony.
Yeah.
And I really am proud of him and proud to know him, along with Ryan and Fravor sitting by his side. I almost showed up to that, but I chickened out. I still hadn't quite had my. I just finished getting an update on my pre-publication, which was my last wicket to go through.
Okay.
So it wasn't quite ready to go public yet, but I chickened out.
I don't think anyone would blame you for that. And then you mentioned graves. I've got some stuff I want to touch on later on that, and there's a couple things I want to come back to with it. But we got to give the people what they want, and while this is like behind the scenes, and I think I wanted to give you a platform to kind of explain the whole process, your history, and why you even became a whistleblower, but. We'll move on to Nellis, right, and what you experienced there, because that's, again, mind-blowing. So I remember this. I remember in 1995, I'm only a couple years younger than you, David, so and I'm not good at math, but 1995, whatever age I was really into the subject. There wasn't a ton of shows out there, but there was one called Sightings that I used to love to watch. And so in 1995, I see this Sightings story, and it's got the Nellis footage from 1994. And when you look at it, you can tell that is security footage. That's footage from a base. And you could hear the chatter between the operators looking at the camera. And then you look at this craft and you're like, this is either like some crazy exotic thing that they don't even know about on a base like Nellis. That's a UFO, man. Like the way it moves, and it almost looks like it's changing shape. So that captured my attention right away. And then backstory was, I guess, either a contractor or somebody leaked it, that had the film, leaked it to a couple UFO researchers, one guy out of Germany, another guy in the States, and then it got to Sightings. Walk us through, and I know you've done this a bunch, but bear with us. Walk us through your experience at Nellis during that time frame when you had your encounter and that tape was filmed.
Sure. As I was saying earlier, we worked on the top of Black Mountain, which is kind of north central, western side of the Nellis test range, which is where we had all our equipment. So just so you understand what we were doing up there, we did what were called flag exercises. And we would invite, people from all over the world to fly aircraft on the Nellis test range and learn how to survive and fight through, say, communications jamming, how to use their radios properly so that you get bombs on target, even though there's a lot of noise or white noise or radar jamming and things like this going on. So they had to learn how to fight through all that. That's what we were there to train them to do. So we were pretty familiar with literally all the aircraft in the inventory, not only the U.S., but you're talking about all of our allies as well. So every 2 weeks we would change out crews because it's about 4 to 6 weeks every flag exercise. So we had different crews going up every 2 weeks. Sometimes people just love going up, or say they're having a baby, and we had change out weeks. So some of them would trade with other guys and gals that were going up range on whatever 2 weeks they were supposed to be assigned to. So anyway, the first 2 weeks, the crew had come back to Nellis Air Force Base and checked all the vehicles in, and they were excited about having seen something the previous week before I was supposed to go up, because I was going up on the next Monday with the next crew. So I'm hearing all this stuff about people talking about something that looked like a chopped up helicopter, or it was a UFO or whatever, but it apparently flew right by Black Mountain. And we have windows that overlook the valley in between Black Mountain and the next mountain that's there. And apparently people actually saw this thing really close up, not too far away from them, because it traveled right by it. And you're correct. The video was taken on the cameras that we have on range up there. They're part of an integrated system that's meant to record everything, because if any of the air crews that come to train there die or crash, they want to be able to review everything and see if there's some flight safety issues that they need to correct or that could have prevented the mishap. So everything is recorded, and that's what captured this UFO. Was this UFO came onto the range in 1994, and it just surprised the heck out of everybody. So what I didn't expect was the following Monday that we would all be driving up range to, go up there and start working for the next couple of weeks. And we all were called to go into the video operator's trailer, because they operate out of this trailer that we called it, that was inside the cantonment area, where you could refuel your vehicles or change a flat tire, do some minor maintenance on your cars, stuff like that. So we ended up going there, and that's when, for the first time, this video operator that had captured this UFO coming onto the test range, he said, here's a piece of paper. I want you all to write your names, whether you're here last week and whether you saw this craft, check the check boxes and all that good stuff. But I'm going to show you the video. And we all gathered around. There's about 10 to 15 of us, and we all gathered around, his position, and we reviewed the video. And some of the people that were there the previous week were like, yeah, that's what I saw. Me, I hadn't seen it yet, but I was like, wow, that looks really strange to me. And this is, you're talking at that point in time, I had already worked in the program for about 2 to 3 years. And then this was one of the few months after I got out of the program. So it didn't jive with anything I knew from in the program or out of the program. So I'm like, wow, that's a really strange looking crowd. So we all got in the car because we had to get up range after the video, after reviewing the video with this guy. And there's a lady that was sitting against the wall. Her and this other guy, they just looked morbidly scared, like really like something had shaken them up big time. And the lady kind of grabbed me by my arm as I'm going out the door to get back in the vehicles and take off up to Black Mountain. She's like, there's somebody on the range. Don't talk to him. Don't talk to him. And I'm just like, okay, thanks, strange lady. I don't know you. I don't know why you're so nervous about this. And I'm like, okay, we won't talk to anybody. And so what I didn't realize was that she was warning me about what was probably, I should have took to heart, because within about a half a mile to a mile from the cantonment area, there's this craft resting on the desert floor about 50 yards up from the shoulder of the dirt road we were traveling, because everything's dirt roads up there, by the way, very, very little paved areas. But 50 yards on the north side of the shoulder of the road, there's this craft that looks exactly what was in the video. And then there's this person on the side of the road that's running towards us in a very strange way. It looked like he was going to fall over. And it looks like he's trying to hail us down and get us to slow down, because he wanted us to stop. And he's wearing the same battle dress uniform as all of us were. So he had some kind of affiliation with, being in the military or working with the military. So as we're getting closer, I noticed his skin has this, he looks like an albino with a blue tint to it as we're getting closer. And I feel like, like I say in the film, the program, I thought he was freezing to death. I thought this was a human freezing to death. So I'm telling the driver, because I'm sitting right behind the driver, and he's also happens to be the ranking individual. I said, hey, we got to help this guy. He looks like he's got hypothermia. I'm starting to unzip my field jacket, because this is like October, November, very cold up there. Just definitely cold up there in wintertime in the desert. So I'm trying to pull off my jacket. I'm getting ready to just wrap this guy up and get him in the vehicle and warm him up. And then we get to only a few feet. He was only a few feet from the front of the car, and the guy in the passenger seat, he just makes an odd comment. He's like, he's got no ears. And I'm like, well, that's kind of rude. The guy's probably dying, and you're talking about his ears. So I didn't care really, because I was starting to, we were close enough to now where we were slowed down, and I could get out of the car even though it was still moving a little bit. And I popped open my door, stepped out onto the roadway, and still thinking how rude the passenger was, or the guy in front of me was, saying that odd comment about his ears. I shut the door and I look up, and sure enough, he's got no freaking ears. And his eyes are twice as big as mine. The irises likewise, but the irises are very dark. Have you ever seen somebody with really dark brown eyes that you can hardly make out their pupils? That's kind of how dark they were. He indeed had that albinos type skin, and I could tell that this was just his natural skin color at that point. But I still thought maybe the bluish tint part of his skin color was because he was cold. So I was still offering him my jacket. And at the same time, I'm very scared because I'm like, I don't know if this guy's a mutant or what. I'm looking at his ears, looking at his uniform. Luckily, at the point where I started to really freak out and realize this guy wasn't from Earth, I was like ready to freak out. He starts talking to me, and it's verbal and it's telepathic at the same time. He's talking a language I don't understand, yet I can understand every word as if it was my own language in my head. And he's saying that his craft is damaged. He needs tintium, I believe it is. And it's I know now, I didn't know this back then, that it's a byproduct of nuclear fusion, I guess, of some kind, and that there was a whole ton of this over by the Tonopah Gate, because that's where they detonate atomic bombs and nuclear bombs. And there should have been a ton of this tindium, buried inside of the sand down there, where there's this whole area where like a crater from all these detonations. I should have pointed him to there for that, but I told him I didn't know what this tindium was. I thought he was just mixing up the word with some like titanium.
Yeah.
He's like, no, that's not what I want. It's not what I want. So anyway, we just have this conversation, lasts about 5 minutes or whatever, maybe a little bit more. And he doesn't even say goodbye, but he just kind of turns off the roadway once he realizes they can't really help him. And he gets back in his vehicle in his craft and takes off and over the roadway. During the conversation, I did notice that the people in my vehicle and maybe the ones behind me, because we were in a convoy, there's about 3 or 4 vehicles usually that went up range every 2 weeks. And I don't know, but the people in my vehicle at least looked like they were in a trance of some kind, and that their minds were just numb, like they weren't experiencing the same thing I was or something. But they did look very. I almost laughed because it kind of looked stupid. They looked like like they're drooling on themselves, kind of thing. But anyway, as he went over the roadway, everybody came to. Everything was normal at that point, and the ranking guy said, we got to get up range because he noticed the time, and we had to go set up the equipment, so we had to get out of there and get up to Black Mountain and start setting up for the first push of the day. That's what we call it. You have an AM push and a PM push. The AM push obviously is in the morning, the PM in the afternoon. And that's when the aircraft come out and do their dogfighting and everything else. And we do our training with them. So we spent the rest of the day up there. I do have some missing time over lunch that I can't explain. I also told David Grush that's what happened. I had a star map that David Grush made me reproduce. That was emblazoned in my head. It's still there. And when I reproduced it, David Grush looked at it, and he said, do you know what this constellation is? And I'm like, well, no, this has been in my head. I don't know anything about constellation. I could probably point out the Big Dipper, and that's about it. And he said, no, this is reticuli. And he said, just recently, he said, did you know that this star system has some planets that are in the Goldilocks zone? In other words, they might be habitable. And he said, we just recently discovered that. And I was like, no, I had no idea about that. And the other part of the residue memory I have of the missing time, and maybe some other conversation I had with this entity that I met, is that this red star, this big red star, there was a history there because David pushed me on. He said that red star, he said, is there any significance with that red star that you have in the star map that you drew? or you gave me. And I'm like, initially I was saying no. And then as I was starting to think about it and focus on the red star, I got a flood of like flashback memories all of a sudden. And I started crying on the phone. I couldn't explain. I'm like, yes, something horrible happened there long ago. And I think that's where he's from, is what I told David. I said, because I think his planet died and they were forced to colonize. And the memory that I had, the feeling, sometimes actually it's hard right now, I'm kind of choking back, but what I got from the memory, the flood of the memory, was that this star had expanded and taken out his planet. But some of his people, just like we probably would, there's some people that would die on our planet and not want to go to another colonized planet. That's what happened. But because they're telepathically connected, it was very sad because they felt their people dying, their friends, their family. And that's what's really hard for me to take. And I'm like, why am I crying over this red star? Why would I have these kind of strong feelings? I never had that before, but this was something I found out later that happens to a lot of people that are contacted by beings that are telepathic, is that sometimes your mind gets wiped of the memory. However, when you think about olfactory things or additional items, it can actually cause a flood of memory like that. So here it was, that I had this residue memory of his world, and I can only gather that he had shared that information and then wiped it kind of like out of my mind until David Grush literally kind of brought it out of me. So it was a very unique experience. David can tell you about it as well if he wishes to. He was there with me. And then I later on gave testimony after that discussion with David. But that's pretty much how it rolled out. So the week before, it was just a video. The second week, here I have an encounter with the actual pilot of that craft. So that's what was happening in 1984.
Man, it's a lot to unpack. But, as I was thinking about it, and I think when we were messaging back and forth over the weeks, I'd spent some time with people that have similar experiences. And one of them being, I spent just over a year ago a whole day at Kathleen Martin's house up here in Florida with, Betty and Barney Hill were her aunt and uncle. And what's interesting is very similar to where there's some missing time. As you know, Betty drew the star map for Zeta Reticuli. And they didn't, I don't even think they had, she had no way of knowing, like zero way of knowing how to reproduce that. And she did it. And then there's other people I've met too, that they have a history of, or an incident that's happened before, whether it's in childhood, maybe some form of sighting or encounter that's relatively close. And then later on in life, like in your case, you got involved with the program and probably had a reason for that. And then with the convoy, you're talking, it feels to me that you were selected out of that convoy to be the one to talk to for, I think, a number of reasons. I don't think it was happenstance, just from talking to a number of people that have experienced things like you. That's for me. I think if, as you described, that happened, that you were chosen for a reason. Because let me ask you this: anybody else in that convoy, have you talked to them down the road and they acknowledge what's happened?
Yes, the driver, the ranking guy, I've talked to him, and as soon as I mentioned this incident to him again, he ghosted me.
Okay.
I had contacted him and tried to contact a couple of the other folks. James Fox also tried. I think Kyle Putoff might know a few of them as well. There's several people that have verified that these people do exist, that these people were with me on that day. And I think that speaks volumes for, not only me coming forward with it, but here are people that are investigators that actually can verify that this is probably something that actually did happen.
Yeah.
That these people did exist or do exist. Unfortunately, there's one guy who said something about the ears. He seems to have disappeared.
Really?
Nobody can even figure out where he ended up. So it's just kind of weird. Like he was there and now gone. I hope he's okay. Anyway, that happens in military circles anyway. You know, your buddies sometimes, unfortunately get depressed after all the stuff you've been through.
Yeah. Know some. So I guess to my point earlier, and this would be probably a good segue, you had some things happen to you as a child that I think you and your mom had witnessed in your house. Describe that.
I would say that, first of all, that these entities that I'm about ready to talk about have always been protective, especially in my childhood years for some reason. My mother has seen them twice, and she was there last year when I was given a lecture during UFO Con. And I had luckily it was near where my mother and my family live in California. So they all attended. And so the whole audience not only got to hear me tell people about my childhood experience, first of all, that's what I wanted to tell you, but they also got to see my mother and my sister confirm, these things we also experienced with him in his youth. And they verified everything. So it was really good for the audience to see that. Not only am I talking about my family actually remembers some of this stuff too. But anyway, the incidents themselves consisted of an entity flying in my window and on the base of my bed. It felt like a really heavy, person sitting there, and it was kind of pulling the bedclothes really tight. And when I looked up, there was this huge, I could only describe as like a cherub-looking being, about 1.5 foot tall. It kind of had a pale blue glow to it, had wings, no arms, had a pair of legs ahead. And man, it did scare the heck out of me. And I got my mother and father out of bed, and they both came into the living room. I called it a butterfly at that point because I was only like 5 or 6 years old. And that was one of the earlier entity visits. And then a couple of years before that, when I was in England, or a year before that, also I had 2 individuals that I think were Nordics. But I may be mistaken, but they looked just like us. But these guys had platinum hair, blue eyes, skin tones very similar to ours, but they both wore the same silver gray kind of outfits with sashes around for a belt. They saved me from a pedophile as I was coming home from school one afternoon, excuse me. And they showed up the next day, which is when my mother encountered them, and they were checking up on me. And they asked how I was. They ended up showing up in San Jose when I was 10 years old, years later, when we were struggling very much because my dad went to Vietnam, and we had very little. We were really poor. I remember having only a package of hot dogs to eat for like a week at one time. We had no furniture or anything, and my mom had to hold down 3 jobs just to keep, the home going. But anyway, that's when they show up again. And they actually went and talked to my mother at one point, and they showed up on my school bus and sat across from me again. They all were wearing the same silver gray kind of outfits. They weren't wearing a sash, though. They looked more normal clothes. But they're the same 2 individuals that I recalled from England that had saved me from that pedophile. And my mother said that, they looked exactly like that when they showed up and talked to her. And it was a very strange conversation. She said they asked a lot about God and spiritual kind of things. And she said she thought it was very weird because they're wearing these like cloaks with hoods, like rain jackets kind of a thing that were purple. And again, they kind of look, they're not identical, but there are enough similarities to where they look like brothers, if not twins. So they look very close to each other, and they stood about 5 foot tall, maybe a little bit less. So, because I remember them being about the same height as me when I was 10 years old. So here we are again with me and my mother both experiencing these individuals, and they seem to show up at the most critical times of my life. And that kind of goes back to what you said, is that maybe that I've been picked somehow. Maybe I'm being protected somehow. Maybe there's something more to my life than I give myself credit for. I just don't know. I'd say that if I was picked for anything, and they are spiritual beings, like my mother says, asking about God, the only thing I could think of was that, my dad was a horrible alcoholic most of his life. And my being around and loving him caused him to heal. And he gave me credit for that. But it took 10 long years after I graduated from high school and was in the Air Force when he finally quit and became the man he should be. And he really turned his life around. He died honorably, let me put it that way. Very proud of him. If there's something, in other words, that I think I contributed to, it would have been that. In a spiritual sense, is maybe that helps save him in a way. And maybe that's something that maybe all of us have a part in, is that maybe there is this spiritual side to us that is much more important than our material world. And it makes me really think about that stuff very deeply sometimes, is that, just the simplest, smallest things that we get involved with during the day might have a huge impact in somebody's life, and later on for all of mankind. And maybe that's what they're tuned into, because they can see the future and the past and how it all plays. And maybe they are involved in our lives this way, and that sometimes they go unseen. If I hadn't experienced the things that I have in my life, I don't think I would have attributed them to being extraterrestrial at all. I would attribute them to be like a spiritual kind of.
Yeah. You said a lot of stuff there that resonates with me. And part of what I've done over the years is make some documentary films, right? And I grew up on Air Force bases, Elmendorf Air Force Base, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, Davis-Monthan, a couple of them 2 stints. And I always had a fascination. I was actually 2 years old when the Malmstrom incident happened. At Malmstrom, my dad was stationed there when Robert Salas experienced that. Of course, we didn't know about it till many years later, but always had an interest in it. So when I got an opportunity to investigate some of this stuff, I experienced things that I didn't think I'd experience. Right, a blue orb shooting through the trees right in front of us, and we got the audio of it because we were filming something else, talking about it, and we just saw this softball-sized blue orb zigzag through the tree line, and we couldn't figure out what the hell it was, right? And then we spent 5 days at the Conjuring House and did these experiments. But each place I went, I would get a very clear vibration, static electricity that would either start in my arms or legs, and you could see the hair stand up and move up to my head, and other people would experience it as well. But really, when I left the Conjuring House, we kind of we messed with some things I don't think we should have messed with, and my life took a drastic turn after that. And it pushed me, I guess the parallel here is it pushed me into faith. It pushed me into a deep dive into faith, because I knew that there's dark, there's light, right? There's got to be both. And here with Ryan and myself, we've got a theological base that runs pretty deep, and we don't have a conflict with, I guess, what you would call extraterrestrials or paranormal. They're part of supernatural, I guess. For me, I've got this rough theory that we're set apart. We're made in God's creation, and this vast universe where galaxies actually turn like a clock, but it takes them 220 million years to make one turn. That sounds like an eternal clock. Like there would have to be a bigger, that's something very, very large scale time-wise, right? So it's so vast that I don't have a conflict with life out there. I think maybe we were set apart, and I think the fascination with a lot of whatever these are is the fact that maybe we are made in His image, and maybe their life that have well advanced over us, but they don't have that connection, maybe the soul, the connection that we're made in His image, and that's got to be compelling, fascinating, maybe scary to some or threatening to others, and that's just me talking. But it was interesting when I saw you and heard your story, and then you hear the the naysayers and the people that talk shit, I guess, right? And afterwards, and then I'm like, wait a minute, you've got Eric Davis up there with 2 congressmen flanking him, and this isn't the hearing. This was like a public-facing setting, and he calmly talks about Nordics, reptilians, grays. He's talking about the species, matter of fact, like we're talking about dog breeds, right? Yeah. And yet people are like, well, if he says it, if he says it, maybe there's some credibility here. But at the end of the day, there's nobody that can convince somebody that this is real until they experience it. And I know we're getting close with disclosure. I would venture to bet in some form or fashion there's a little disclosure fatigue with people, because they think that people that if they go in front of Congress in a public-facing hearing, that they should roll out all the videos and everything they can talk about, and they just can't. And they can do it in a skiff, but we can't. The public can't jump into a skiff with them. And we also, if Immaculate Constellation legacy programs are there, and the government, people like yourself in a program can't crack that, now it's the government against the government. So how is the public supposed to get like the piñata is going to get hit on this legacy program and all the reality will pour out? There's too much to protect there. And I understand the only way to do it is through people like yourself and get Congress involved. So I gave you the nod, man. I know that it's not easy, but what, as far as faith and yourself, what implications, or what's your take on it? I know you mentioned these are maybe more spiritual in some cases. What about is there a dark side to it, or do you think one of these things maybe isn't so benevolent?
There's a dark side, there's a light side, as you say, and everything in between. I went into the program probably just after I had the most in-depth faith-seeking, God-seeking years of my young man's life, of my young life as an adult. So I had read the Bible cover to cover. I'd read doctrine from other doctrines as well. The Christianity is the one that stuck with me. And I literally, reading the Bible even after the program and seeing and hearing the things that I had seen and heard, it rocked me at first. And I thought, God, why did you expose me to this? Is this, is everything a lie? Is it the truth? And as I began going through that, I felt like I was being shown this is the reality of the Bible, of the scriptures, of the ancient texts that describe these fallen angels in a pantheon of God kind of a way, all around the world, that this fallen angel culture actually exists, that God actually exists. And these are the way it manifests itself, even to people like Abram, having invited in what he called the sons of God into his tent to have food with him and to introduce his family and everything. And that's when they bless him with his offspring at an old age, him and his wife. That was a tangible person coming in to eat food with him. And it made me realize that all these things that I thought of, that the pastors and everybody else that's in the churches, they kind of gloss over, and they don't want to discuss the realities of this. That there are things that we can't explain, that are mysteries. However, for folks that have experienced this, to me at least, it seems that this is the reality of what is written already for us, that these beings have been here in all the pantheon, and even the Bible describes a pantheon of other types of angels. They have the seraphim, the cherubim, all the other types of angels. These are all, are they all different species? Then I would say yes. Apparently they don't even look alike. Some of them appear interdimensional, like the ones that Isaiah saw, and things like this in the Bible that had multiple heads, multiple wings, multiple arms. But all this stuff. They might have come from a different dimension where that's what they look like. So to me, at first, yeah, it rocked my world, but eventually I came to the conclusion that I just saw the realities. God revealed the realities of his existence and the truth of the Bible in my life. That's what I look at it as now, is that the Bible is more real to me than it ever was. That's kind of where I'm at now, is that it's really, there's nothing in there now that I look at and read and I go, oh, that's just hogwash or myth. I now look at it and go and try to figure it out and go, yeah, it's kind of, I can see that, now after everything I've been shown, I can definitely see that everything's honest. It's like an eyewitness account of a lot of different things in that Bible. And I look at it like that now. So it actually strengthened my faith.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And we all have our path. And it's interesting to say as kids, well, these experiences, we couldn't make it up. That's going to be the thing that brings you to faith. You wouldn't even believe that would happen in the first place, but yet here you are, and it's been a long journey. What do you still have things that happen to you that you can't explain?
Yeah, all the way up during that UAP task force, I had seen the triangular craft a number of times, like 3 or 4 times, sometimes with my daughter in the car. I think one was with my daughter in the car. But I think that, again, that's another hybrid craft, or at least is based on some technologies that were both exotic and our own. And I think maybe they're testing it at Nellis Air Force Base. There's a huge area there that's almost as big as Nellis Test Range that they can fly around in. And I think that that's something that happened just as early as the early 2020s to mid 2025, and even here in my new apartment down here in Alabama, we had the power go out, and I even had an experience during the power outage. It was gone for about 24 hours. The power went out for about 24 hours, and I'm just sitting there in the living room waiting for, reading a book, thumbing through something, or, just passing the time. And this light appears on my back porch. It's about the size of a large softball, but not quite as big as a soccer ball, kind of a thing. And it just kind of pops down underneath the eave of the where the gutter is out on the back porch, and it just hovers there for a minute, and then it comes through my back door, as if it wasn't there. And it doesn't diminish, it doesn't fizzle, it doesn't crackle or pop when it goes through the glass and the blinds that were there, and it comes into my apartment, and it goes through my kitchen, and then when it gets about 10 feet from me, it disappears, and then it reappears about 3 feet in front of me, and I'm looking right at it, and I get this feeling like it's alive, like it's an entity of some kind. And then it takes a hard right, and it goes and disappears into the wall. And when it disappears into the wall, it chirped, kind of like a chirp, like a I don't know, like a smoke alarm detector makes. And I thought maybe it was maybe ball lightning at the end of the day, and maybe it just kind of caused a little bit of a short or some kind of a burst of power, and maybe it did set off my smoke alarm or something. But it disappeared, and then because I'm sitting by my living room window on my couch, I can see outside across the street, and there's a tree line there, and there's 3 more of them bouncing through the trees. I thought at first, I'm like, are those flashlights? But the sun was just going down, so I could still see everything very clearly. And I'm like, no, these are just floating there. There's nobody holding these lights. There's no flashlights or whatever. And you know how a flashlight, when it turns left and right, you can tell because the light no longer, you can't see the light anymore. It only points in one direction. Well, these would go to the trees and they would not diminish at all. So there was like they were the ball of light. And there was 3 of them, and they just would go through the trees, and they went all the way down through the trees until I couldn't see them anymore. And I ran outside and they were gone. I can't explain that. So I've even had that happen very recently, last month, actually.
Oh, wow.
Is when So yeah, these strange things still do occur. I do have very strange dreams every once in a while. Even had a scientific friend of mine from Europe. His wife is kind of spiritually connected, and he had me, or his wife had him call me. This one time, my wife told me to call you, Jay. Okay, what? Like, oh, am I in trouble? Kind of thing. He's like, no. She's asking me because I can hear in the background. She doesn't. I think she speaks Belgian or something, and I could hear her talking to him, telling him to ask me something. And she's telling me to ask you, what did you dream last night? And this is something I can't explain. This is kind of weird. I still can't explain it. But anyways, I'm like, my dream? He's like, yeah. She wants to know what you dreamed last night. And I'm like, okay. I said, well, it was kind of weird. And he's like, well, yeah, tell me all of it. So I was just like, well, I felt like I was on the moon. And I went into a cavern where there was a bunch of people, and they were all arguing, and they asked me some questions. And he said, that's it. That's because he was relaying all this to his wife. And my wife says, yes, that's it. He said, do you remember what you said? And I said, well, yeah, I was kind of defending Earth and wanting them to intervene on something important. It was like a debate that they were having on the moon or something like that. So anyway, and then she tells me some other things about this dream that I never relayed to her or her husband, and she shocked me. I was like, how did she know what was in my dream? And then I asked my friend, I said, hey, John, how did she know that? And he said, well, I didn't tell you that before, but she's a spiritual person. And she said, you weren't dreaming. That was what she calls it astral projection. And she said she saw you there. And because she was, meditating and was astral projecting herself. And the two of you ran into each other in this. And I was like, weird. Because to me, I just thought it was a dream. I always put them off to the side. But I've been having those kinds of dreams. They're very vivid. They're always in color whenever these strange dreams. Because I know I have different types. There's ones that are in black and white, and I can't remember very much, but there's other ones that are very real, very realistic. And that was what she had described to me. So I can't explain that, how somebody can actually dream what you dream. That just shocks me. I'm just like, wow, again, how do we do that as humans? We must be kind of spiritually connected somehow, or telepathically, or some kind of empathy goes on between us where people like his wife can engage like that. To me, I look at it as just like weird dreams.
Yeah.
And I still do.
There's, again, a number of people I've talked to. It's always, I remember Terry Lovelace. I don't know if you know about him. He's got a abduction. He was in the Air Force, went out to Devil's Den in the 70s with his buddy to go backpacking Large Triangle. They get abducted. It's a whole story, but he talked about being brought to the moon. And he was a former assistant state attorney for Maine. He had a lot to lose by coming out with it. And he had like a implant in his leg and that he found in 2012 jogging after he'd retired. And that's when he finally knew it was related to them and came out with the story. It's not uncommon to have, especially dreams. And then the more we're getting into even Jake Barber and his team and doing psionics to bring craft in, and understanding that this has been going on as part of the program you were involved with for a long time. And then we touched on, was it Ryan Graves, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so just today, I think it was announced that Ryan is going to release 900 reports from pilots that haven't been released, that he's been compiling. And I think I just saw the news this morning that he's going to release those. So that'll be something to look out for sure. But I guess to wrap up, man, what's next for Jay Sands? Like, what do you hope happens with disclosure based on what you know? I mean, we see what we see, but based on what you know and the people you know and the direction it's going, are you still hopeful about disclosure, and what do you think's next?
Yes, I actually am waiting for for Congress, Luna, her team, the other individuals that they have been interviewing these past weeks. I'm waiting to see where that all leads. I'm hoping they get the information they need. I've always said that what is really needed by Congress, both the House and the Senate, is to get a no kidding, boots on the ground type investigation rolling. In other words, they go in with the authorities and in some cases probably firepower to go to these locations that they've been told. I mean, they've literally had everything given to them on a golden platter, with names, locations, what's going on in these locations, even some of the problems that are going on with leadership. Because I honestly believe there's a big culture problem. But they've got all that to tackle. And I hope that I see that come to fruition, that a real investigation takes place, because I'm so sick and tired of people using the term, well, incredible claims or require incredible evidence, and I'm like, well, yeah, but that also requires incredible investigation and unprecedented investigation, because you've got all the eyewitnesses with very credible credentials and backgrounds, people that are nonsensical, like myself, that have just experienced some very strange crap. And they've got to get out there and do something with it rather than just talk about it with the people. So that's one thing I'm hopeful for. I do see a lot of movement in that area, so I'm waiting right now to see if these new round of talks behind closed doors are going to result in that. What's next on the horizon for me? I am trying to finish up my book. I'm going to try to publish that. It's going to go over everything that we kind of generally went through here, my childhood, the family experiences, how my Air Force career involved all of this, some of the experiences later on in life. Also, like I said, has been following me around all my life, these things. So I'm going to detail out in the book there for folks to go through that and get to understand, at least from my point of view, what I think it is, and the way that I look at it, at least from a perspective of a guy who actually was in the program and heard, all the things that I had heard and experienced the things that I experienced. So you'll see that. And then I'm going to probably do some interviews and lectures here and there. And we'll just see how that all pans out, because I like to keep the public informed. And I find that a lot of times we need to have that conversation with the public. All of us experiencers have to do that, because it's a big deal for folks that haven't had those experiences to talk to people like us. It's just like, if you're a war hero, hearing the stories for yourself is so much more involved and real when you get to talk to a no kidding combat vet, and that's kind of what these our experiencer groups and people and whistleblowers are. They are the experiencers, and they're eyewitnesses to this. So sometimes they have the perspective that really helps to at least frame what we're going through right now. It's like what we talked about here. If I were to frame what we just discussed, there's a heavy spiritual side to this, honestly. That's one thing that you can take away from our conversation today. The other thing is that this is real, no kidding real. That this goes way beyond that, because the other parts of this that I've been holding back on is not only is it real, but if we're talking about other civilizations, you're talking they've got lives that are quite different from ours in some cases, and maybe very similar in other ways. And people don't readily talk about that aspect, that they have a culture of their own, they've got a society of their own, they've got a government of their own, they've got a planet of their own, maybe even a group of planets. They might have suffered their own wars. All of these things are the things that I'm holding back on, because it's just too much information right now, because a lot of people are just stuck on the fact that, are UFOs real? They don't even think about the peoples that are flying these things and manufacturing these vehicles that they can't explain. So I'm waiting for that day when I think the world's a little bit more ready for that conversation. And those are the things that I would say that, so the book, the disclosure folks working with our government, another big deal, and just more in-depth discussions, hopefully, as people catch up on the topic. Those are the three big things that I'm looking forward to. Excellent.
Well, listen, we're not too far from you then down in Sarasota, Florida. It's not too close, but not too far. But you get you get together a group that wants to come do discussions and everything. We'd love to have you here. We'd love to bring you and whoever else you want to bring along in studio here. That would be great to meet face to face and sit down and go through it with you and anybody else you want to bring along. But listen, I appreciate the time. Keep trucking. Let me know about the book. Keep me posted on it, and we'll have you back. We'll have you back.
Thanks, James. I really enjoyed it. It was a good discussion, and I totally enjoyed the whole thing. So thank you very much for having me on.
You bet. We'll be in touch, Jay. Thank you.